Welcome to Finding Meaning with Suresh Basnath. I'm Suresh, your guide on this global journey, diving deep into the world of life, love, and money. Today we have Barbara Penningroth on the podcast. Barbara embodies vibrant living, blending curiosity and compassion in all she does. A skilled nurse, professor, therapist, and author, she has touched countless lives with wisdom and insight. Her adventurous spirit led her across 29 countries, embracing diverse cultures. Barbara is deeply spiritual and has found solace in Catholicism. Barbara's legacy of love and gratitude, as seen in her roles as death doula and relationship coach, continues to inspire, reminding us to cherish life's moments. Barbara is a beacon of passion, courage, and faith, and I hope you enjoy our conversation. I invite you all to join us a brief meditation before we begin our conversation. Welcome, Barbara. So great to see you here. Before we begin, we'll briefly meditate. Then we'll start our conversation. How does that sound?
That sounds wonderful.
We'll close eyes if it's okay. May I guide the process?
Please.
Yes. So we'll close the eyes. Breathe deeply. Inhale from nose, exhale from mouth, or whatever feels comfortable. Pay close attention to your breath, only to the breath, nothing else. Feel as you inhale the breath and feel the breath as you exhale. Quickly observe your whole body from head quickly. See if you feel anything, then go down to your forehead, cheeks, throat, and right shoulder all the way to the fingertips, and left shoulder all the way to the fingertips. Make sure that your shoulder are relaxed. Just loosen them up. Now, observe and feel your chest, stomach, and also your spinal cord from all the way to the neck to all the way to the bottom. See if you feel anything. Now, start from right legs all the way from top to the knee, knee to the ankle, ankle to the toe. Make sure your right feet are touching ground properly, grounded. Same thing with your left leg from the top to the knee, knee to the ankle, and ankle to the toe. Make sure you're properly grounded. All the weight should be as much as possible in your feet and your feet touching the ground. We'll breathe 3 times. One more time. Feel your whole body and connect yourself to your heart. See how it feels, how it's feeling today. Today, we're going to have a conversation, casual, about real life, authentic life, and inspiring life. We don't need to think about anybody else, just be present with each other and have real conversation. Welcome to the show, Barbara Penningroth. Thank you. So
Thank
nice
you.
to see you. Yeah,
And thank you so much for inviting me. I'm looking forward to getting to talk with you.
absolutely. Um, Barbara, when I always think about you, I have known you for some time now in our different programs, and it's always been a pleasure to hear your perspective about life or the program in general. And I think that you deserve 3L. That means love for life, life for love, and love for all. Your embodiment of that vitality, love, and kindness.
Thank you,
Um,
Chris. That's a
yeah.
real accolade. Thank you.
And I would like to, you have both amazing life story about your outside world, which is traveling and doing all sort of things, and also inner world, and your amazing professional background. Maybe we'll start with a little bit about your professional background. Tell us, you had a multitude of different professional background, from being a college professor, being a psychotherapist, and healer and coach. Give us, how was it being be able to involve in so many different areas, and how did you balance some of those things, and what kind of meaning you got from it?
Okay. So I would start off. Uh, one of the things that I would have to say is that I was led in every single one of those changes, and so from interiorly, and if you will, from spirit or from source too. But I started off in nursing, and that was sort of accidentally, because I had been really interested in art. I was an art history major, and I was really
Mm.
interested in that. And my father's business failed, and so I had to do something useful. And so I came back home, and I said, okay, I'm interested in science. I like working with people. Let's be a nurse. And so that's how that started. And I originally worked in labor and delivery, and then gradually moved into the mental health area, and then from there moved into public health. And so later, I discovered that I'd gone so far in the nursing that I was mostly in administration, and I wasn't working with people anymore, and I wasn't getting a chance to spend the time talking to them. So I ended up thinking and going into, I will be a psychotherapist. Then I can talk to people. And then when I became a psychotherapist, I couldn't touch anybody because you can't do that with your license. And so I said, okay, source, okay, I want something that combines everything that I know. Okay. And within, and this always happens this way for me, within just a few weeks, something shows up. And part of the key, by the way, is to pay attention. When you sincerely ask for something, you're probably going to get it, but maybe not like you expect. And so it's really important to be paying attention for those cues and trust that they're going to be there. So within 3 weeks, I saw an ad for a workshop on energy healing, and I thought, well, that's curious. Which is another thing. Be curious, and so I registered for the class, and I realized at that time that this did in fact combine everything I know, because it's working with a person physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, in their whole energy field. Because we don't end here. We're big. We go way beyond our physical body. And so I went to school there for 4 years with Barbara Brennan's program, which at the time was in New York. Now it's in Florida, and became an energy healer. And in the meantime, I was in my nursing. I was a college professor teaching nursing for about 20 years in the middle of this, and then went into the full-time psychotherapy practice and then the healing practice. And I'm still doing some of that work right now, but I feel like I've been sort of led every step of the way, and all of it involves seeing people in their wholeness,
Mm.
okay, and being with people and helping them see who they really are, and what gifts they've brought, and how they can, with those gifts, bring those gifts out into the world. I think we're each
Mm.
born with unique things that are gifts to this world, and if we don't bring those out, it's a loss for everybody, for ourselves and
Mm.
for the whole world, if you will. And so my
Mm.
job I saw as mostly helping people recognize the gifts within them, no matter what area I was working in, and and how to bring those gifts forward, and the possible ways that could happen, for instance. And sometimes it's something you do, and sometimes it's something you are, and usually it's a little bit of both. And
Mm.
so I guess that's what I would say about my career, and sort of
Mm.
the thing that was the link between all the things that I've done.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How did they all different? You're all of your different background. How they help you sort of finalize your reach to your final, which is touching people, healing people, helping and mentoring, all of that. How all kind of different experiences help you sort of give more to the people.
I have a lot of enthusiasm, and I have a lot of curiosity. Okay, so I think that the background, each one of those things, inform the others. In other
Mm.
words, because I have such a complete background, I've got an idea how the body works. I have a really good idea
Mm.
about health and illness. I have a good idea
Mm.
about how the mind contributes to that. And then the energy work essentially ties everything together. I have a good idea how people learn and how they don't. And 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 so uh, it all was tied together, I think, most in the energy work, but it also brought me, each one of those things brought me to a new place. And
Ah.
and I would say right now my work is more being like fully present in every
Mm.
single moment, being really
Mm.
here, and being very aware, and being very connected. And then
Mm.
from that connection to myself flows through the gifts I have, if you will, to bring into the world, which is
Oh wow.
basically self recognition for each person,
Mm.
to really
Mm.
appreciate who they are and what they're bringing.
Mm. Mm. Oh wow. Wow. And why mental health was really important to you at times?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, why? I think that the idea of the mental health came to me mostly because of my cross cultural work. Also, I had been invited to the place I really moved into mental health was when I was working on Guam. I've been to about 49 countries in my life, and a lot of it was working with cross cultural programs, looking at how you can bring Western health practices, both mentally and physically, into a culture in a way that honors and is compatible with that particular culture. And so uh, the way I came to mental health was probably through the cross cultural work because it was so fascinating to me about how the language you use mostly um, dictates what you understand and what you can see and what the possibilities are. So, for an example, on when I was working on Guam, there's only 6 words that are have anything to do with feeling, and they're understood as physical sensations in the body. So, for instance, the word for sadness, which isn't a concept in the language or the culture, the word translates as tight heart, and and the people in the culture see it literally as that. Okay, so we're dealing with a physical process, a tight heart,
Mm.
not a mental problem. People would see things that we might call mental problems more as religious or social issues that needed to be worked with within their religious framework or within the framework of the community. So I got really fascinated with, because if you can't think it, if you don't have a word for it, it really doesn't exist in your worldview. And so I got really, really fascinated with how people think and the ways that they think and the way they use language because it affects so much who you are.
Oh, wow. Wow. And you also went to other countries in terms of the health projects, right? Did you go to
That's
other,
correct. Yeah.
what other countries did you go to?
Well, the places I was primarily doing the health projects were in Zimbabwe and Nepal and on Guam, which is a U.S.
Mm.
territory, but it's still a
Mm.
very indigenous culture.
What year almost? In 60s or 70s?
Okay, well, the in Nepal when I was actually doing the health projects was in the 80s. Okay, and
Ah.
also in Zimbabwe in the 80s, and then I was on Guam in the early 70s primarily.
Mm. Mm. In Zimbabwe, what kind of projects did you do there?
Well, same kind of thing. It's health
Oh,
projects,
okay,
like for
cool.
instance, maternal child health, which was also what I
Mm.
was doing in Nepal primarily, and it's looking at, okay, what are the cultural beliefs about pregnancy, about childbirth, about how you
Mm.
take care of yourself during that. What are there rituals that are absolutely essential for the physical, spiritual, mental health of yourself or the child? And so we're looking at the way that the culture, if you don't introduce things, new ideas in ways that are culturally relevant, nobody's going to do it.
Yes, absolutely.
so for instance, on Guam, the belief was of what we would call a mental illness. Those were caused by the Tau Tau Mona, who are the spirit people. And there were particular rituals within the culture to deal with the Tau Tau Mona. And so the way you would work with Western mental health practices is you would go to the Tau Tau Mona and establish relationships with them, and you're asking them, at what point in this ritual could a person, for instance, take a medication and not interfere with the ritual? Okay. Or another really good example was we were finding a lot of babies who were developing tetanus, and it was
Mm.
because the welcoming ritual within the culture was to sprinkle soil, dirt, on the umbilicus. Okay, and that's where the tetanus was coming from, but it was essential part of the culture that this happened. You can't say just don't do this. But what we did discover by taking apart the ritual very carefully was that you could put a gauze pad over the umbilicus
Mm.
and then you could drop the dirt. Okay. And so we started discharging babies with gauze pads saying put this over before you drop the soil in the welcoming ritual, and the tetanus cases stopped.
Mm.
Okay, so that's what I mean about being very aware of the cultural beliefs and the way people
Mm.
look at things, because you just can't impose ideas on people if they're not in their being. And believe me, culture is in your being.
Mm. Mm.
you,
Mhm.
whatever culture is raised in, you never get rid of that. It's always there. And then
Oh, wow.
sometimes one other thing I'm going to use you if I can, Suresh.
Sure.
When I was working in Nepal, and I give you an example in Guam too. Um, the way that you say no in Nepal is not the way that you would do it as a Western in the United States. So okay, so show us how you'd say no. Right. Now, is that no?
Sometime also, yeah.
Like yeah, like this, which is we would interpret it. I would interpret it as yes. And even after I knew that, it took me months and months and months before I could accept that emotionally as that's what was being said. The same thing on Guam when I was teaching. I know I was getting no response from anybody, and I was thinking, is anybody understanding what I'm saying? And then I began to notice people were going like this. And it turns out that that's the gesture that means I'm following you. I'm understanding. Keep going. Okay.
That was in Guam or where?
On Guam, yeah. And so it took me months and months before I could feel like this meant yes, I'm following you.
Yeah, cultures are how we express in different culture. It's amazing. Yeah, yeah. I still sometimes get confused. So people are when I came to the U.S., they're like they look at so confused when I say yes or no same time.
Now, how would you say no?
I even get confused now because sometime, yeah, sometime. When we also talk with a lot of body language,
Yeah.
a lot of body language. So and also using a lot of hands all the time. So it's very very different than Western culture, especially in the U.S.
Hmm.
Uh, good. Um, and also in your inner world, you have gone through so many experiences, training and workshops and a spiritual journey. How did it start? How did you
You
start?
know, I've always had a sense of spirit. I mean, when I was
Mm.
4 years old, I was building rock cairns out in the backyard.
Mm.
And my mother asked me, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm trying to get back to God." And so from being very young, I always had this sense of that there was more, and that in some way I was being guided, or I was being um, loved, cared for by
Mhm.
something beyond myself. And
Mm.
so I would have to say that's sort of a principle, although it's taken many different forms
Mhm.
during my life.
Mhm.
And so religiously, I was raised as a Protestant, and but not very religiously in the sense of I attended, but it was sort of not a major central part of my life. And then gradually it became more so through dreams, through visions, through things like that. And so and also my love of ritual. I love
Oh,
ritual. I think it's really
really?
really important. So we'll get to that in just a second.
Mm.
And
Mm.
and I was drawn through like a 20-year process to Catholicism, but I would still say that one of the things I'm most drawn to is the beauty of the liturgy of the ritual and the sensoriness of it, and
Mm.
how it involves all of you, you know,
Mm.
your physical body, your emotions, your senses, all of that is present, and I love that. So the
Wow.
other kinds of things that would
Yes.
probably be in that is in probably not in 1983. My husband and I went to a tantra workshop given by Charles Muir, and
Mm.
tantra it really introduced me to the idea of sexuality as spiritual practice. and
Mm.
and I have to say, tantra changed my life.
Oh,
and
wow.
and I went on to become a tantric educator and working with couples and individuals in terms of looking at sexuality as a spiritual process, not just physical, and
Oh.
that you can use sexual energy to um, to access spiritual energy, access
Mm.
spirit, and so that really changed my life. Then when I was let's see, when I was 45, I feel like called to a vision quest. And again, this was through I was in a bookstore, saw a book, and suddenly burst into tears. and I I never, I picked up the book, looked at the title, and it said Vision Quest, and all of a sudden I'm crying again. And so
Mm.
those are my signs often that I'm being led in this particular area. And so the Vision Quest was when you look at this is another kind of ritual, but basically it's whenever you do ritual, it's a portal from one way of life to another.
Mm.
Okay. Uh, and it's also because ritual uses symbols. Symbols are the meeting point, the
Mm.
most when you have most access between the physical world and the spiritual world. Okay, so Vision Quest involves a lot of that. So I spent a year in preparation in a very different way than I usually did because it was like I was called to each step. Rather, normally I would make a list and go down everything in order. I didn't do that this way. It was more that I was called piece by piece. For instance, I had discovered that I had thought I was going to do this in the mountains because I'm really attracted to the mountains and spent a lot of time backpacking and hiking and things like that. But I was over on the coast, and it was at midnight, and I was floating in a hot tub that was absolutely at body temperature. And all of a sudden, it was like being in a womb. And all of a sudden, I heard this voice that said, "It's to be in Death Valley at Easter." I'm saying, "Where's Death Valley?" So
Really?
in the Funeral Mountains. That's what it said, in the Funeral Mountains at Easter, and
Oh.
those are in Death Valley.
Mm.
And so I said, "Okay." I mean, it was so clear. And again, I think one of the hallmarks of my life is that if you really ask for something or you're really involved in it and you get information like that, or you get this really strong sense that this is where you should go next, it's really important to follow that.
Mm.
My experience is you'll get that 3 times. If you don't follow it 3 times, the universe says, they're not paying attention. we're not going to,
Ah.
we're not going to, that time has passed. And so it's really
Mm.
important that, that you follow those. It's sort of the deal. If you're going to get answers, if you ask sincerely and you get answers, the deal is you follow them or you don't continue to get that kind of leading, at least in my experience.
Yeah, the
So,
challenge I see that uh, with at times with me or other people, because sometimes we use head all the time, right? Brain, because then we come up with the logics, and the mind can come thousands of different options and scenarios, right? Because then one might say, oh, should not do it, it doesn't make sense. Others say, oh, I'm confused, right? So did you listen to your brain or your body, or how do they
well,
two work?
no, it's more like, well, I sort of got knocked on the head, but in terms of they were pretty strong signals. But when I listen to my head, it's usually fear I'm listening to. Okay,
Mm.
and all the reasons why you should or shouldn't. There's a saying I love that Ananias Nin has. It's life expands or contracts according to one's courage. Okay. Um, another thing that I'm going to go back to this because it's been a leading point in my life. When I was in my counseling practice, I had at the very beginning I had 6 different women who came. They were all in their 70s and 80s, and they came. They didn't know each other, but they came with pretty much the same underlying issue, if you will, which was, I don't have a lot of time left. I want to make sure that I've done what I came here to do. And in
Mm.
every case, it was grief work
Oh,
because
wow.
they had known what they'd been called to. One of them had wanted to be a dancer, and her
Mm.
head had told her, "Oh, you won't make any money at that. Oh, you can't make a career of that." And so she didn't do it. And
Mm.
so that was one example, but in every case it was grief work because they'd known what they'd been called to. They knew what really made them alive and excited in their life, and they didn't do it. And now it was too late. They
Ah,
didn't
yes.
have the resources. They didn't have the health. They didn't have the the capacity to do what they'd been called to anymore.
Mm.
And I knew at the time, I thought, Barbara, you were being shown a lesson here. This is really important. Pay attention. And so uh, in fact, where it really came to me, I guess let's see, I was in my 60s anyway, and I was talking to a friend about something that happened 15 years ago, and I was thinking, gosh, that isn't very long. Gosh, in 15 years I'll be 81. So, which is sort of who I am now. And so I thought, um, I am right where these women were, and I still have my
Mm.
health. I still have the capacity to do this.
Mm.
What have I not done that I really would wanted to do younger? Okay, and this is a big question. Okay, this is how you live with no regrets. By the way, you keep this current.
Mm.
I'll get to that in a second. Anyway, so uh, I said, well, what haven't I done? And I said, well, I got married instead of going into the Peace Corps. I really wanted to go into the Peace Corps. And so I started investigating um, the Peace Corps first, but then
Mhm.
different organizations, because I knew I wanted to live in community because I
Mhm.
hadn't lived in community. That hadn't been
Mhm.
an experience I'd had yet. And I was looking for the philosophy of the different organizations that I was working with, and I ended up being accepted into Mercy Corps. Okay,
Mm.
and I was going to be placed in Guyana for 2 years, uh, doing basically nursing education. And in that process, I got led to the monastery, and so. But by the time that happened, I was already almost ready to be placed. So I'd closed down my practice, I'd rented my house and everything else. So when the other thing came up, I was ready, and that's a whole nother adventure. But um,
So
it
yeah, I'm uh I'm a financial advisor, money manager. So we always think about money. Um, and I'm not in love with the money. But don't get me wrong, I like money. Um, and because a lot of people they cannot pick between passion or money, or they get confused and insecurity financially, right? So they always go after whatever is financially secure. Was the money was the issue when you make those transitions, and how did the money play a role in your decision making?
okay. So for me, money is a construct. Okay,
Mm.
money only exists because we say this piece of paper is worth something in the world.
Mm.
Or now it doesn't even exist because it's all it's all actually in on computer someplace. It isn't even real. Okay, but um, so so it isn't how much money you have. It's I would have to say you have to have paid attention enough so that you can support yourself. Okay, but but money is really about experience for me.
Mm.
And I used to work in the ICU, and I would see people who came in and they'd worked their whole life for this future that was going to happen after they retired. Okay, and they haven't been retired 3 days, and they're in the ICU, and that isn't going to happen. What they'd planned. Okay, so I had an experience where I was in the hospital, and was having a heart arrhythmia, and they kept coming and looking at the monitor and saying, "Ooh, I don't like the way that looks," and then they'd leave. And then a nurse came in and she says, "Do you want to be resuscitated?" And I said, "Am I that bad?" And she says, "Well, I don't like the way the monitor looks." And then she left, and I'm lying there and thinking, okay, if you died today, what would you be really sorry that you'd never experienced, that you'd never done?
Mm.
And the second thing is, what relationships have you not cleaned up? Have you not said what you wanted to say? Have you not told somebody something you really wanted to know, like you loved them or that you appreciated them or whatever? And I discovered in both areas I was in really good shape, you know.
Mm. Oh,
And I
great.
don't have a lot on my bucket list anymore because as much as possible, I've done each thing that I've been called to do when I was called. And I try to keep my relationships really up to date. in the ICU and also in the emergency room, one of people's big, and also pay attention in in ICU, in emergency rooms, one of people's biggest regrets is like somebody, their husband comes in and dies or something. They can't remember if they told them they loved them or when that was.
Oh, wow.
They can't remember what happened this morning.
Mm.
Did I tell them goodbye or was I not paying attention? And it's those
Mm.
things that makes me cry, but those things that make the difference. Like, do you
Mm.
remember the last time you made love?
Mm.
What I'm talking about is attention and being really, really present. And that's really my big edge right now. That's where I really am called to live every single minute of my life with as much attention as possible.
Mm.
So
You're
as much
talking about
presence.
love, making love in 80s or 60s or 50s or any time?
Anytime. I'm teaching a course now about sex over 70.
Oh, really? Oh, my
Yeah, yeah.
goodness.
Yeah, and the course is really about attention. It's really about sensory awareness, and
Mm.
it's about changing your perception of sexuality as just genital sexuality, if you will, to a sensory experience of being truly with
Mm.
yourself and with that
Mm.
other person.
Mm.
And
Mm.
it's sort of people's reaction to this course is really sort of funny,
Yeah.
but they
I mean,
leave
you
feeling
can,
inspired.
yeah.
So
And you can train them well so that they can run for president because we need people who are 70s or 80s to run for president in the United States.
well, we got that.
Going back to the point you mentioned earlier that you have no regrets, so that means you're not, you have no fear for if people, if something happens to you, you're not fearful, or you
Well,
have
I
accomplished everything. Are you
well,
afraid
I'm
of
not.
death?
Well, let me put that in two ways. I don't have regrets about things I haven't done, and I
Oh,
don't
okay.
because I've done them, and
Yeah.
I don't have regrets about relationships that are not cleaned up because I keep those cleaned up. I pay attention.
Mm,
You know, I look at each time as this could be my last. What do you want to have happen here?
mm,
Okay.
mm,
Um, but in terms of dying, I've had the profound privilege, both as a nurse before, but particularly with 9 people who were family members or friends, of going through the last several months or weeks of their life with them and being with them in their transition. And it is a profound experience. And I don't, having gone through that so many times, I don't have a fear of death itself. I do hope that there are people who are with me who know something about dying, uh, and are able to. One of my tasks when I'm with somebody in that process is to help them have the death that they want, and often that
mm,
is what still needs to be said, what
mm,
what how do you want to be remembered,
mm.
how, and also right at the moment in the last hours of death, what do you want to have happen, who do you want
Oh, I
there,
see.
who's who, do you want music there, and if you do, what, uh,
Mm,
do do you want flowers? Are there certain scents that are comforting to you?
mm,
All of those things, and most people never think about that piece.
mm,
The day or the couple of hours before death. What do you want? That was
mm-hmm.
I really learned that the last time I helped someone through because I was there at that last minute. I'm saying we never talked about this. I don't know. I
Mm,
just had to make the decisions based on what I already knew about this person, but it would have been really wonderful if we had been able to have that conversation before.
oh, wow.
But I
Wow.
just hadn't thought of it. Now I do.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
fact, I went home and typed up all my instructions. I want this music.
What kind
and
of music you
I would love
want?
to have this person. Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Um,
really?
all that kind of thing. Most people have what happens. well, actually, most people don't, but they should,
Don't plan.
what's going to happen after their death, but they don't
Mm,
think about that whole process of dying
mhm,
either,
mhm,
especially the
mhm.
very last part.
Yeah. Culturally, also, it's very difficult in certain cultures, like in
In this
Nepal.
culture,
Yeah, especially this culture is more open about death and preparation, right? Even for in Nepal, people don't talk about death at all, right? If you talk about death, it's unluck or
hmm
bad luck, whatever it is. So
I
we
would
never
say it's
talk
the
about
same.
death.
I would say that's the same here. I would say most
Mm,
people don't. I
mm,
mean, death has gone uh, from what used to be and is a completely normal process of
mm,
life, if you will,
mm-hmm,
which occurred at home with your family there and so on, to a medical issue that happens
mm-hmm,
away from home in the hospital for the most part.
mm-hmm,
And there's so many other choices. There's so many other
mm.
ways that could happen, but not if you haven't thought about it in advance.
Mm, mm. Let's just stay here for a couple of minutes. You mentioned that you help or you gone through the death process with so many relatives or your people you're helping, or you witnessed maybe 7 or 9 people
Yeah,
going through
nine.
the death process.
Yeah,
How was it like? How was it like?
you know, um, I was doing a bunch of things at one time. I know, and I also really recommend hospice, and also more and more what people who are called death doulas, who have more time than the hospice people do to help work with the family.
Mm-hmm,
But initially, it's working. It's being there with the person, and again, being there really present and looking at what kinds of things haven't been covered. Like the last one, when I got there, this was a really good friend of mine. I discovered he didn't have a will. He hadn't done a power of attorney. He hadn't made any arrangements for where he was going to be buried or what was going to happen. And nobody was talking to anybody about this because everybody was still pretending he was going to get better.
uh,
Okay? And he didn't want to talk to his family because he felt like they would be discouraged, and his family didn't want to talk to him because they felt like he'd be discouraged. Okay,
ah,
so so basically, when I first got there, I ended up helping him put all those things in place. Okay,
mm,
like okay, let's get let's get this will written, and how are we going to do this,
mm,
and who would you like to be your medical power of attorneys who can make these
mm,
decisions for you. And I said it
mm-hmm,
may happen 20 years from now, or it may happen tomorrow, but we need
yes,
it's going to be helpful to everyone, including
mm-hmm,
your family, to have
mm-hmm,
these all in place. And
absolutely.
then so that was, and then I also another thing that's really helpful for people is looking at their whole life, if they're such like this is where an illness is
Mm-hmm.
progressing, but looking at your whole life. And so I said, what about if you record your life? Okay, so we got a tape recorder, and we had to go back to the actual uh, cassette disc because that's the only thing we knew how to use. Okay, cassette disc. And I said, "What if you record your life?" And he ended up thinking that was a good idea, and he had 8 hours of his life. He didn't get the last 20 years. He got too sick before
Oh,
then, but I
wow.
knew him during that time, so I wrote a big a letter talking about who this man was in the last 20 years of his life as I knew him.
Wow.
Okay. And then what I did with those, I said I had them all. I said I was going to make CDs for his family members, and they said, "Barb, we don't use CDs anymore." And I said, "Okay, well, what do you use?" And
When did this happen? When was it? How
this
many
was
years ago?
it was just 2 years ago. Okay, so
No more CDs.
no more CDs. And so I said, "Well, what do you use?" And they said, "Well, we could use a flash drive." I said, "Okay, I'll put them on flash drives, on thumb drives." And I ended up giving those to his family and to his sister and so on. So they have a complete record of his life, and that was real satisfying for him, and also for his family later. It turned out to be really, really important. So then after that period, then you're entering the more final stages. And at that point, coordination becomes really important because there's a lot going on. There's different services. Sometimes you'll have people who are coming to provide services in the home. You may have social workers coming in. You may have um, you may have a bunch of doctor's appointments that you're all having to coordinate. And so that person is usually not capable of doing that by themselves at that point. And so it's really helpful to have somebody who's watching the schedule and can figure out how all this stuff happens. And now you're going to be concerned about a lot more care, like meals and all of those things. So there's a lot of coordination that happens at that time. And then increasingly, as you move toward the time of death, there's a lot of physical care that needs to happen, and the person loses more and more of their capabilities, and so you're gradually taking more and more over of that, and then we get to the stage we've talked about, that final stage. But the
Mm,
whole process is really a beautiful process, and I feel so privileged to have accompanied so many people on this
mm,
process in this way.
mm,
In fact,
mm.
right now I'm learning how to be a death doula because because it organizes all of these things into
Oh,
a very
wow.
systematic way.
Yeah, that's one of the challenges because I'm a financial advisor and I work with a lot of clients, and we try to also have them get all the wills and things done. But sometimes people don't have the priority on those things, and that it
Priority.
becomes real. Yes, uh,
Priority.
yes,
and
and
and if you can't do it for yourself, think of it as a gift for your family.
yes,
Because I can tell you, when somebody dies and those things aren't in place,
yes.
it is a huge mess, and it puts so much more stress on your family.
Oh, absolutely.
So
I had a case. I had a couple of cases. One, everything was perfectly done, and the other one was nothing was done. And the daughter, the oldest daughter, who was the appointed part
the
of
executor,
executor,
yeah,
and she was gone through so much stress because she could not handle any of it.
right,
She was already under so much stress, and then she sort of gave up. Then attorney had to do all of stuff for the family. So,
yeah,
and that's why some people, children or loved one, they cry when that person dies. Either way, either they are so thankful that they did everything, or they cry because everything was so mess they can't handle it.
that's true.
So,
That's
so
true.
it's so important. It only takes like few
The other
hours of your time.
the other thing I would
Uh,
say is make sure that all your papers are in one place, and
yes.
your. I just have what I have on mine is I have a complete list of my bank account numbers, my insurance policies, everything, and exactly where they're located. They're all located down in one
Mm,
drawer.
mm,
Because I've been an executor, and exactly what you're
mm.
saying is really clear. You spend if the person hasn't taken care of this, you spend weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks trying to just find things,
Mm, mm.
and you don't even know if they even exist.
Yes, and you're the one of the few person I have met who actually has written down their own eulogy. What do you call it? Your
Eulogy, yeah,
eulogy. I always have
yeah.
trouble with
Well,
that.
this was
Uh,
this was part of a writing assignment, and the assignment is basically how do you want to be remembered?
mm,
Okay, what would you like if what would you like people to say about your life?
mm,
And so it was a writing exercise, and it
mm.
turned out to be really really important. And now, as part of this death doula course, they're also asking us to do that. And it's really a process
Ah,
of looking inward and becoming really comfortable inside
mm,
working with death, and really
mm,
looking at, what has my life meant? What are the
mm,
themes of my life? What are the
mm,
things that have been really important to me in my life?
mm. Okay, this is a great place to maybe conclude our conversation here, because this is a perfect place. We'll learn more from Barbara and give us a sort of like 30-second summary of why did you write that book and what's the
Right.
name of the book?
The book is called A Healing Divorce: Transforming the End of Your Relationship with Ritual and Ceremony. And the book was a result of when my husband and I, of 25 years divorced, we were in so much pain. We were looking at how could we honor what we'd had together. We said, well, what if we have
Mm,
a memorial service for our relationship? And so we did, and put together a parting ceremony. And this book is about that experience and what it
mm,
meant and how others might want to do the same.
Mm, great. Thank you. And please don't forget to check part two episode of Barbara, and we'll come up with more conversation and more insight in life. And thank you for joining today with our conversation with Barbara Penningroth. Thank you, Barbara, so much. So
Thank,
pleased to
thank
have
you.
you.
Thank you so much. I really have enjoyed being here with you.
Thank you for tuning in to Finding Meaning with Suresh Basnet. I hope you enjoyed today's episode as much as I did. Please don't forget to subscribe or follow us on your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. If you have any feedback, topic suggestion, or just want to say hello, feel free to reach out on social media. We love hearing from our community. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, or visit my website at sureshbasnet.com. Until next time, have a great day.